our Western partners are doing this in Ukraine for the first time. I have a feeling in America some people sit in some laboratory and they doing experiments like on rats without knowing the consequences.
I remember last week, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was saying, well, this isn't East versus West. Putin says it is. Meanwhile, Western leaders, well, what are they saying? Prime Minister Stephen Harper is saying, let's boot these guys from our club.
Canada has suspended our engagement in preparations for the G8 summit planned in Sochi. President Putin's actions have put his country on a course of diplomatic and economic isolation that could well see Russia exit the G8 entirely.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, but something tells me that the so-called leader of the free world, that's what American presidents used to be called, he would be against that because Obama's sounding a bit weaker on this issue.
From the perspective of the European Union, the United States, allies like Canada and Japan, and allies and friends and partners around the world, there is a strong belief that Russia's action is violating international law.
All right, so what's he going to do about it? Ben Shapiro joins us now from studios in L.A. Ben, look, I think that you're with me. You're not one of these people saying, let's send the Sixth Fleet from Naples into the Black Sea, but something more than standing up and saying, you broke international law might be required from the Americans.
Well, the problem is that no matter what President Obama does at this point, he has to restore credibility that's been lost over the course of 5 years. He's made repeated moves that have shown Vladimir Putin that he really isn't willing to conflict with him. I mean, everything from the reset button to Syria, to Iran, to the hollowing out of the United States military, which Barack Obama has slashed 30%. All of that is geared toward teaching Putin that he can basically do whatever he wants. So in order for the United States to stand up strong and tall at this point, they're going to have to reinstitute, a significant amount of military spending. I think we're probably going to have to send some armaments over to Ukraine itself. But I don't think any of that's in the offing. I mean, so far, the only thing that the Obama administration has done, and I think this is a huge move, of course, is to cancel the presidential delegation to the Paralympics in Sochi. You know that President Putin is absolutely quaking in his boots at that. I mean, between us canceling our presidential delegation to the Paralympics in Sochi and having our first drag ceremony, there was some sort of drag queen show over in Japan among the U.S. military. I know that Vladimir Putin has to be looking at the U.S. military and looking at Barack Obama and thinking, wow, these folks sure are intimidating.
The USSR, Russia, is trying to intimidate. They did set off an intercontinental ballistic missile test. U.S. State Department, though, quick to say, look, we knew about it. It was scheduled. This isn't a provocative act. I say it still is. And Obama sounds weak. I think the strongest statement actually came from the G7 saying, hold on, we're not going to your meetings right now. That may sound like an empty gesture, but the 7 most powerful economies in the world saying, we're not meeting with you now, smarten up, is at least some kind of diplomatic sign. That's far more than Obama's been doing.
It's something. I'm not sure that it's enough. I mean, the problem is, of course, that Russia has significant oil ties to virtually every country in the EU. So unless the EU is willing to turn off the oil spigot, I'm not sure that Russia's actually going to feel the brunt of this. The truth is that the EU had an absolute opportunity to woo Ukraine, and actually the previous leadership of Ukraine, Yanukovych, they had an opportunity to woo him repeatedly, and they didn't do very much to do it. The IMF refused to give a loan. And Putin stepped in and did what he does best, which is to be a strongman, evil dictator, and now he's playing around in his backyard. I'm not sure what at this point is going to deter Putin exactly from keeping troops in the Crimea. The truth is that in the aftermath of what happened in Georgia in 2008, Russia still has significant numbers of troops in Abkhazia and South Ossetia, which are 2 breakaway provinces of Georgia. So I think you're going to see this repeatedly from Vladimir Putin until he actually feels intimidated by the West. But the truth is that why would he? I mean, he does have an ally to his east in China, which has made very clear that they see themselves, Russia, and half of South America as basically forming a new bloc to counterbalance the power of the United States in the world. And unfortunately, President Obama has created a power vacuum.
Well, China is backing Russia and Ukraine because they want to apply the same tactics to Taiwan. I want to play a couple of quick clips for you. Sarah Palin talked about this and was ridiculed for it a couple of years ago. Here's what she was saying during the 2008 presidential election.
After the Russian army invaded the nation of Georgia, Senator Obama's reaction was one of indecision and moral equivalence, the kind of response that would only encourage Russia's Putin to invade Ukraine next.
So Palin was ridiculed for that. She said on Facebook, yes, I could see this one from Alaska. I'm usually not one to told you so, but I did, despite my accurate prediction, being derided as extremely far-fetched scenario by the highbrow Foreign Policy magazine. Well, so that was 2008, but 2012, you and I covering the U.S. presidential election, and Mitt Romney saying it, and here's what Obama had to say back then.
What's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America? You said Russia. Not al-Qaeda. You said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
This man's the opposite of Midas. How do the American people not see it?
What's incredible about the Obama administration is they truly believe that faculty lounge-style condescension toward America's enemies is actually what's going to save the day, the same way that faculty lounge-style condescension toward Mitt Romney and Sarah Palin propelled them to electoral victory. The difference is that Vladimir Putin is not Sarah Palin. He's not Mitt Romney. He's actually from a foreign country and runs a foreign country. So he looks at Obama. Obama says things like, this isn't 21st century behavior. And Vladimir Putin looks at him and says, what do I give a damn about that? Well, why should I care? I mean, I can basically do what I want, and you're not going to stop me simply by declaring that I'm on the wrong side of history, as President Obama is so fond of doing. So, I think that the American public, President Obama benefits from the American public's unwillingness to really follow these issues particularly closely. The truth is that if Putin were to invade Poland tomorrow, I'm not sure what President Obama would be doing differently, and I'm not sure that the American public would be in favor of expending U.S. troops and U.S. treasure in order to stop him. So that being the case, we've basically entered the 1930s again, in which we have an aggressive dictator in Vladimir Putin and other aggressive dictators in China and around the world in the Middle East, and we have a West that is willing to appease them as far as humanly possible. All
right. Well, unfortunately, this is not the only relationship that President Obama is messing up. Stick there, Ben. We'll get back to you in a moment to talk about what's going on between the U.S. and Israel.
We left entirely Gaza. We've not only frozen settlements, we've uprooted entire settlements. We've released hundreds of terrorist prisoners, including dozens in recent months. And when you look at what we got in return, it's been scores of suicide bombers, thousands of rockets on our cities fired from the areas we vacated, and just incessant Palestinian incitement against Israel.
Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, sounding like he was giving a lecture to Barack Obama on what they've done. Why would he be doing that? Take a look at what Obama said in a quote from Bloomberg News Service. If Palestinians come to believe that the possibility of a contentious sovereign Palestinian state is no longer within reach, then our ability to manage the international fallout is going to be limited. The condemnation of the international community can translate into a lack of cooperation when it comes to key security interests. It means reduced influence for us, the United States. A lot of people are taking that comment to mean find peace with the Palestinians or you are on your own. Ben Shapiro joins us once again from L.A. Ben, I have to side with Netanyahu. I mean, it's no surprise to people that watch this show that I stand with Israel, but you just have to look at the facts of what Israel has been doing, what they've been offering, and what they get in return to know that there's no partner across the table to find peace with.
I'm still waiting for the Palestinians to make one concession, like one. That's all, really one. I mean, this idea that Oslo was ever some sort of even deal is asinine. Oslo was always blackmail. And what has occurred now is the President of the United States siding with the blackmailers. I mean, when he says that if the Palestinians lose hope, then suddenly they'll get violent, I have a question for him. Why is it that the Second Intifada broke out after Ehud Barak offered virtually 100% of what the Palestinians wanted? Was it because they lost hope? Or is it because that hope actually drives them to believe that they can destroy the Jewish state? The truth is that Israel has been more safe in the last 5 years under Bibi Netanyahu, with virtually no negotiations going on, than it was in the 7 years prior, when there were heavy negotiations going on, whether it was between Ehud Olmert or Ariel Sharon, or whether it was Ehud Barak. I mean, the bottom line is this. President Obama is from this bizarre fantasy world in which the things that he wishes are. So he wishes that the Palestinians were willing to make peace. Therefore, they are willing to make peace. And the obstacle is Israel. The West is always the obstacle when it comes to President Obama. And so when he looks at Israel and he sees a country that has been willing to make on-the-ground concessions repeatedly. And he says to them, you guys need to make more concessions or you're on your own. And I don't know how else to see that except that this is an anti-Israel president or an anti-Semitic president who is perfectly willing to watch Israel burn so long as it serves his broader foreign policy goal of lowering the amount of prestige and ability for Israel to defend itself. Every decision that this man has made in the Middle East, every decision this president has made in the Middle East has been to the detriment of the state of Israel. I don't think that's a coincidence.
I think it's been to the detriment of the United States as well. Going into Egypt early in his presidency, holding the speech at the university in Cairo, inviting the Muslim Brotherhood to sit up front and listen in. The man is not looking out for American interests, never mind Israeli interests.
That's certainly true. And I think, look, there's a coincidence between American interests and Israeli interests when it comes to peace and democracy in the Middle East. There's only one country that's been willing to have either one of those things, and that's Israel, and that's the country that President Obama is putting pressure on. Meanwhile, he's standing with Iran against Israel. Essentially, he's standing with the dictator of Syria against both the people of Syria and Israel. He's standing with Turkey against Israel. He's standing with the previous regime in Egypt against Israel. That's no coincidence. This is a president who feels that Israel is a colonialist outpost in the Middle East, just like most leftists in the United States, and that means that the colonialist outpost in the Middle East must pay the price for the Palestinians' refusal to make peace.
The biggest issue during the leading up to and during the Sochi Games for the Obama administration wasn't how many medals you won. It seemed to be, oh, gay athletes might be harassed. I'd like to see him go to the Palestinians, either whether it's Hamas-controlled Gaza or President Abbas in the territories, and say, look, until you're having gay pride parades, we're not going to back you. But he won't do that, will he? The man lives in a double-standard universe where he'll try and lecture Putin on the soft things. He won't do anything about Ukraine, but he'll lecture Putin on the soft things. But when it comes to Hamas in the Gaza Strip, oh, whatever you want to do, boys, that's great.
That's exactly right. And when he says that Abbas, and John Kerry said it today too, when they say that Abbas is a partner for peace, what evidence is there that Abbas is a partner for peace beyond the fact that he's a Holocaust denier? I mean, the fact that Abbas has no support among his own population, and that polls show that if an election were actually held today, he would lose dramatically. That Hamas has the largest base of support in both the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. So the idea that Abbas is, number one, that he represents anyone, and number two, that he's a quote-unquote partner for peace, just shows the level of delusion that has now dominated the discourse. The fact is that, you know, Bibi Netanyahu knows that. Bibi understands that. Bibi is not going to do anything that endangers the future of the state of Israel. And if Barack Obama keeps putting pressure on Bibi, Bibi's outplaying him. I mean, this is the reality of the situation. Bibi, like every other leader, recognizes that if you flatter President Obama publicly and then do what you want privately, President Obama can't actually do very much about it. President Obama continues to exert pressure, but you can guarantee that the security relationship between Israel and the United States has basically gone south because the United States has repeatedly leaked Israeli national security information to prevent an Israeli attack on Iran. You can guarantee that Israel has stopped coordinating with the United States in many ways when it comes to their military plans for the future, given the fact that they can't trust the Obama administration not to put that on the front page of the New York Times to the benefit of the Iranians.
Someone was saying to me just yesterday, you mentioned Iran and the bomb. Someone was saying, look, this is a good time. You know, we can't do anything. The West can't do anything about what's going on in Ukraine without escalating things to the point where maybe it does go towards nuclear war. But now might be a good time to take out the bomb that Tehran is building. I don't think that the Obama administration would even do that.
Oh, no. The Obama administration lives in a world where an American power vacuum is actually the ideal. It's not that Obama's not accomplishing his objectives. It's that he actually is accomplishing his objectives of sinking American prestige in the world, of making America a secondary player in the world. The only thing that perturbs President Obama is that people aren't turning around and complimenting him personally. If Vladimir Putin did all of this and said, you know, the reason that I'm going into Ukraine is to defend the duly elected leader of Ukraine, Yanukovych, in the same way that President Obama has always spoken about doing this. And I've really taken the lead from President Obama. And I agree with, if he just praised Obama a little bit, Obama would probably let it go. I mean, this is the problem with having a president who is, at best, a professorial type from Chicago, and at worst, somebody who believes deeply in undermining Western power in the global marketplace.
And unfortunately, that's two issues now that Prime Minister Harper showing up President Obama. That doesn't speak well. I want Canada to stand strong on the world stage, but we shouldn't be sounding a lot tougher than the Americans on every issue. Ben, we'll have to leave it there. Good talking to you. We'll chat soon.
Sounds good.